A writer, a model, the quest for a long-lost ancient treasure. It's a little bit Jewel of the Nile. It's a little bit Galaxy Quest. This is Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, 2022, The Lost City. Despite the fact that I like Sandra Bullock, she's a funny, entertaining personality. I really liked her beginning with Demolition Man, which she was fabulous in back in the old days. I was still not expecting that The Lost City was going to be as good as it turned out to be. We're living in the era of woke, and almost everything put out is nothing but preachy, screaming, ranting Marxist ideology shoved in your face. Now, actually, The Lost City is a good example of how you can be a crazy Hollywood celebrity and be like that and still happen to write a good story. They do make references to the culture of our time, and so there are references to this stuff that's going on that's quite woke, but it's never done in this weird fourth wall breaking, staring at the screen and screaming at you like Ally McBeal did in the Supergirl series. I always bring that up because it was such an outstandingly disastrous example. So we get the story of a romance author who is pulled into an adventure to find an ancient artifact that she wrote about. Now it's interesting because this is kind of like, there's nothing super original. It's kind of like Jewel of the Nile. She was a writer. She gets pulled into this adventure. But they do this weird change up where Sandra Bullock's character was actually a scholar. She was actually studying history and languages. She wasn't making any money doing that. She wrote a romance novel and started making big money and ended up pulled into romance novels. So of course there's sort of this insinuation of, can the educated, intelligent woman make it, or does she have to resort to this? Ends up being part of the story. But because she has a background then really in languages and in the ancient history involved, using some of that in her book, the bad guy who wants the artifact figures out she's a lot smarter than you'd think for the romance novel industry, checks it out. Her husband and her did archaeology together. The bad guy abducts her, needs her to translate the map, the directions to find the ancient artifact. So you have both the romance writer, but the intellectual woman, and it's done with this cool finesse that ends up being completely plausible and entertaining. We also get sort of the interesting take on the action hero. Now, instead of being a woman author who's pulled into an adventure and some adventurous white knight rides in to save her, we get in this version the story of her cover model, which was good stuff because most of us remember when Fabio was famous just for being Fabio, even though we never read those novels. Every time you went down the aisle at the grocery store, he was there. They even call him Fabio jokingly at one point. Really good stuff. So we get the cover model who looks the part but isn't really the part and tries to be when the chips are down. And you do get the action hero. Brad Pitt appears as the action hero who suddenly ends up dead abruptly. It goes nowhere whatsoever when you're expecting that he's going to be the hero. And of course, there's a whole intent there, right? The guy you're expecting ends up dead. The guy you don't expect, the cover model, ends up being the guy who comes to really rescue her, and they fumble through it as ordinary people. That's why I said at the beginning that it's a little bit Jewel of the Nile, except you don't really have the white knight. You have these two people who together grow to figure out how to do what they need to do. They have the smarts. They just got to focus on it to rescue themselves, to save the day and uncover the mystery. That was the part I felt made it a little bit Galaxy Quest, because you have these people, she writes the fiction, he plays the part on the cover and at the fan get-togethers, but they have to figure out how to be the people they portray for real. There's a number of ongoing little jokes, like all of the bad guys, all of the men have women's names, which there doesn't seem to be any ideological thing to that. It's just like it starts out that way and is meant to be funny. Abigail, Leslie, well, Julian, which isn't really a female name, but kind of, out of place for the thug. Toying at toying with some of those things that go into novels where people have names that sound like what they do. Of course, the action hero Jack Trainer, who was a trainer, and it turns out his name really is Trainer. There's a whole interesting commentary on that throughout that is funny. It comes across in a way that's funny, not in a way that's degrading the material that it's referencing, but poking good-hearted humor at it, some good, wholesome fun at its expense, because for those that love it but know that that's what it is. And that ends up being a major theme of Sandra Bullock's character. She's never been happy with what she's doing writing romance novels. She's got this sort of feminist twist where she literally looks down on herself. She looks down on her own activity because she feels like it's nothing compared to her scholarly work. And so she's derisive of her cover model. She's derisive of her own work and its non-substantiveness in her view. And she's derisive of her own fans. And there's a great moment in the jungle running from the bad guys as we learn more about our cover model and how mature he is. Channing Tatum actually gives her a speech, and this is what makes it totally non-woke. Kathleen Kennedy and some of these woke people would never have allowed this in a movie because they would have looked at it as mansplaining, but it's not really. The guy who's been the cover model gives the author a lecture about respecting her fans, and that he felt kind of embarrassed when he started on that career, but then he realized so many people are made happy by what I'm doing, how could I be embarrassed by it? It's a great moment that is really breaking the fourth wall for Hollywood. Hollywood needs to take that as a direct message to itself. Why are you derisive of your own fans when these are the people that are consuming the stuff and they have loved this in the past, and now you're intentionally poisoning the well of franchises with all this garbage because you want to stick it to those fans you don't like. Maybe you should have cared about your fans and saw the good in what was happening before. And that's really what The Lost City does. It references some of the feminist stuff, and she uses the phrase mansplaining after he gets done explaining it to her. But it's a good human story, the way it comes out, even being a comedy, because you literally could have reversed those roles. There could have been he was the writer and she was the cover model and her giving him the lecture, and all of it would have still worked. It would have worked because it was telling the story of an author and a cover model and these different human perspectives and how they grow and they learn. And that did not matter who was speaking to who. And these people now with the woke, with the checklist, oh, you can't do that. You got to switch this. You can't say this. And that's the first sign that the whole well has been poisoned and your story is just not going to be anything but screaming at the screen. So Lost City, it has all those sorts of cultural references to the things that are going on now. Every movie should, set in contemporary times. But it does not come across as preachy whatsoever. It comes across as these are real people going through real character development and living their real lives, even against the backdrop of this wild Indiana Jones, Jewel of the Nile sort of adventure. I really enjoyed it. It was good to see. It was refreshing to see that something can still be that good anymore. It's rare. They're out there. Lord willing, the good stuff will be coming back as people realize that get woke, go broke is more than just a slogan. Anyway, check it out. Let me know what you think. I just saw it because it was built in with my Amazon Prime. So if you got Prime, go watch it. Let me know what you think. See you next time.